Hey everybody, welcome to Making Sense of It All. I'm your host Jesse Stakes, and as always on a lot of my golf content, I am very happy to welcome Wes Altus as my resident expert. Wes, thank you so much for joining me.
Nice to be here again, Jesse. Looking forward to really cool conversation today.
Absolutely. No, I am as well. This is exciting. So our guest today is Chris Brody. He is the fitting science manager at Ping's Ballnamic. And Chris, this is something I was really excited to have you guys on. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about Ballnamic and wherever else the conversation goes.
Amen to that. I love going down rabbit holes here, so it happens quite often.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
So overview, like I know there's going to be some people that see this, they're going to know what it is, and then there's going to be other people that are more business minded that listen to my podcast, or they're not going to know what Ballnamic is. So high level, please share with my audience what is Ballnamic.
Yeah, Ballnamic is Ping's attempt at giving a ball fitting recommendation. And so I think our goal coming in was to kind of take the tour player's mindset, how they think about golf balls, and package that up into a system that would encourage people to think about ball fitting the way tour players do, and then also pair our data and knowledge on golf balls to give the best recommendation for uh, the player's game that's going through it.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, that's a lot right there. So, I mean, it's, how did it, what was the genesis of it? Like, how did Ping get started? What was the thought behind offering it to customers?
Yeah, so I think there's two different avenues that kind of got us there. Probably the first one was in, I think, 2007. Our VP of Engineering, Paul Wood, he had a PhD in solar flares, and so he knew a lot about how, I guess, projectiles operated on the sun. And so when he came to Ping, he was really interested in studying how does the ball fly, and he worked on a ball flight model so that we could use internally to. I think he had a good understanding of, hey, if you have a 5 mile an hour wind, that can throw off your measured carry and height that you'd see on TrackMan. But if you can put it through a ball flight model that's a more controlled environment, you can actually predict exactly, okay, this thing had a 1 mile an hour more ball speed. It's going to go 2 yards further. Um, so he was really interested in balls, and we initially came up with the N-Flight software, which is an early ping fitting software. And he wanted to convert between the range balls that someone would hit when they're getting fit into premium golf balls. And so he started testing range balls and other premium balls to kind of get an idea of how the market worked on drivers and 7-irons and wedges. And that allowed him to convert when someone was hitting a not so great range ball, convert the ball speed, convert the launch, convert the spin, and predict a really accurate ball flight. So we're always super interested in ball flight for those reasons, and we kept on testing new balls that came to the market. If tour pros are interested in what ball I should try, we could say, okay, this is what this Titleist ball does, this is what this Callaway Bridgestone does. And then I think what kind of got the momentum really going was Marty, my boss. He's a VP of fitting performance at Ping and really accomplished tournament golfer. He's played in 6 major championships.
Wow.
And so he's gotten he kind of gets fit every season with the new Ping equipment, and he really wanted to try the G400 Max when it got released. It was the highest forgiveness driver that we had come out with, but it spun a little bit more than the LST that he typically played. And so he was launching it like 12. We have an optimal launch and spin chart, which says, hey, if you're 170 ball speed, your neutral angle of attack, you should be 12 launch and 2500 spin. And when he was hitting the G400 Max, it was good window, except it was 2800 spins. So it was flying like 10 feet too high of where he wanted. And our tour rep, Ken Note, said, hey, I got a solution for you. He took a different ball down, put it on the tee, and said, hey, just hit this. Marty hit it, came out perfectly, 10 feet lower, hit the window he wanted. And he's like, Kenton, that's perfect. That's exactly what I need. What changed? And they looked over at the TrackMan monitor, and the 2800 spin was still 2800 spin. And like, but Marty's like, I just saw that thing flying 10 feet lower. What happened? He's like, and Ken was like, that's the power of the left dot. We went from Pro V1X to the Pro V1 left dot, and nothing changed in the initial launch conditions, but the aerodynamic profile of that golf ball was to fly lower. And so I know it's like a big kind of aha moment for Marty of like, hey, you can not change someone's launch conditions, and the aerodynamics of the golf ball can unlock another dimension to the fitting process. Um, and I think the tour players knew this, and I think Marty has a kind of philosophy that something that the tour players do 10 years from then will become a fitter, it will become a consumer option. So it used to be that on drivers, you might like tweak the loft, and it became that you had now have adjustable sleeves for everybody. And so I can easily, with a twist of the wrench, get plus or minus a degree and a half of loft. And so it's like, okay, if we can take a tour player solution with golf ball fitting, provide it to the masses, we could be onto something really cool. Um, so that was kind of the genesis of, I think, Marty's push for ball fitting. We kind of ramped up our testing of kind of the whole market of premium golf balls. Um, and then there's a little step of like, how do we actually tease out these aerodynamic properties? And so that's where we're kind of going back to Paul Wood's ball flight model days. I had spent a lot of time kind of tuning in our ball flight model to the new Titleist Pro V1X, and so I had a good understanding of how changing lift and drag would change your simulated ball flight. Um, and so worked on some different kind of mathematical tools to dial in our simulation to achieve the different ball flights that we saw. Um, and so yeah, then packaged it up into a product and try to give access to our fitting community and to consumers who are interested in golf ball fitting.
You know what? One of the things that I think so cool about it, and it's like I can see Wes's eyes, and I can see like kind of where his mind is going with it as a golf professional and as someone who works with people. And then I think about my own self, where I'm a professional at something else other than golf. And my mind, when I looked at it, I'm like, this is cool. This is simple. This is easy. It'll tell me what golf ball to play. Whereas to everything that you just said, there is so much effort and there's so much science behind it, and there's so much information that goes into it. You can make it as simple or as complicated as you want to. You can distill it down to something for someone like me where I'm like super easy. I can plug in some numbers, it'll tell me what to play. Whereas somebody like Wes, or somebody who's a more accomplished golfer, someone who's working with accomplished golfers, can really dial in where they want their player to be for course conditions, for where they're at, for the type of equipment they're going to play. To your point, playing a low spin driver versus something that's going to give you more stability in it. And it's like, it can be so much, or it can be so simple. Would you agree with that, Wes?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just from you guys could kind of speak to this is, a Chrome Tour, this year to the Chrome Tour, that's going to be coming up. They may be the same ball, but they're always tweaking it a little bit. It's usually coming from the tour, and you'll see some people like, yeah, I'm Chrome Tour, and they start hitting the new version, like it's not performing the same. It's not coming out my window, and I'm like, well, dude, what I would do is go to PJ Superstore or wherever and stock up on the previous year's model if that's the one you're in, and just hope they don't change it too much year to year because it is going to affect. I mean, I've seen it around the greens and wedges and stuff like that. People like, I like it off the tee, but in the approach, but it's not performing the same because they changed like the aerodynamics, the cover, something where now around the greens it feels different to them. So it year to year, I know it's the same model, but it just like 10 feet. I mean, a lot of people aren't going to pick that up, but 10 feet means a lot to a very good player, like a lot.
Yeah, that's the fun thing now that we've done it for, I guess, 6 years now. So we've done uh, testing of like the Pro V1 and Pro V1X in 2019, 2021, 2023, 2025, and it's our database is over 100 golf balls. So we're not going to tell you to go buy the 2021 Pro V1X, but we could do that if we wanted to. And so we try to constrain it to, see if is that audio coming through? Hopefully I'll mute the notifications. So we could recommend you try the 2021 Pro V1X, but that's not super realistic. But it is fun to track how do the balls change across those different years. So you can have we can see, hey, spin rates on the 2020 Bridgestone were, I don't know, 500 less than normal. And then it went to the 2022 version and it jumped up 500 RPM, and the 2024 version jumped down 250 RPM. So it's fun for us to see the manufacturers are doing to differentiate the different models, how they're kind of adjusting across years. And it's sometimes it's surprising. Sometimes like, oh, that makes sense. It's kind of fun to track over the years.
Yeah, and I've seen it in a couple fittings that they'll get everything dialed in. They're looking for that like 200 or 300 mile per hour RPM to kind of come down, and they'll just say, "Hey, let's try the ball," and that will either gain or take it away. So it's you're seeing the ball being like that final fine tuning piece into to a lot of the fittings.
Yeah, I think it's where we want our fitters to kind of leverage it. It's like if someone comes in and they're a high spin 7-iron player, I've seen people who have been 8,000 spin, and it's like no matter what you're going to do on the fitting club side of things, you're kind of going to struggle to get that spin down. You can kind of power loft them, get them into a lower lofted 7-iron, but doesn't quite fundamentally change the fact that they're a pretty high spin, maybe steep golfer. And you can give them a ball that lowers the spin by 1,000 RPM. That's like a way more dramatic shift than what I could hope to do with changing clubs. So there's sometimes where balls are really powerful. And the same thing with kind of the Marty's example for drivers, like they can be living a little bit high spin, and you can find a ball that flies a little bit lower. They can be living a little bit low spin, find a ball that flies higher, and it's nice to not have to fight your equipment.
I think it's really cool, like how you take all of that as well, and you guys have created a pretty interesting Instagram follow as well, as far as just putting that information out there, as far as the science behind it, but doing it in kind of an entertaining way. I thought you guys like Ping or Ballnamic has done a very good job with doing that as well. I thought.
Yeah, I'll give Katie credit for getting that one to the finish line.
Yeah, we're working on it, but it's been good so far. So we're hoping to grow that platform a lot.
Well, it's just like anything for those everyday golfers, for those people that are professional at anything but golf, they're going to see that. That's going to catch their eye before maybe finding it in a, from the Ping website or from somewhere else. They're going to catch it when they're scrolling through, looking at their favorite golfers, looking at, kind of the golf entertainment part of the sport, if you will. They're going to find you that way versus finding you the scientific way, if you will. Along those lines, Chris, I had a question for you as far as, do you think that it matters what your skill level is to get fit? Like if you're a novice just getting started versus like, is there a value to getting fit or just go out and whack balls?
Yeah, there's probably like two or three competing factors with how important a fitting is. The range and performance and uh, I guess things that be going wrong with your swing is it tends to be wider if you're lower skills. So you can have someone who's off the charts high spin or low spin and could really benefit from finding the right golf ball. One of the analysis that we've done is how much does gaining 20 yards uh, impact your score. And so for a 90 golfer, 20 yards of distance is worth around 2.5 shots. Um, and then for a tour pro, gaining 20 yards is worth 1 shot per round. And so it's actually more beneficial for that 90 golfer to gain 20 yards of distance. And a bit of context to why that is, I like to think about like if you're 200 yards away from the hole, you're 90 golfer, you might average 4.5 shots. You get to 100 yards and now you're down to 3.5. So you've gained a shot by getting 100 yards close to the hole. If you're a tour golfer, you might be 3.3 at 200 yards. You get down to 100 yards and you're 3.0. So it's zero point 0.3 shots. It's about as a third as impactful to gain those 20 yards. And so that's kind of how you get close to that 2.5 to 1 ratio. And so when we look at our golf ball selection, we see that maybe the worst, shortest driving ball versus the longest ball is 20 yards of distance. So if I'm telling you, okay, how much could you gain by going through a ball fitting? It's 2.5 shots for the 90 golfer and it's 1 shot for the tour pro. But the tour pro is way more sensitive. Like as Wes was saying, the 10 feet of peak height difference, a tour pro is going to pick up on that and instantly say, oh, I don't like that, versus a novice is going to not notice that shot to shot as much. So yeah, I think I think it kind of gives a good flavor of the range of outcomes. The other thing I think that's interesting is that speed is a really important, has it both ties to skill level and to golf ball performance. So the better golfers tend to be faster golfers. And what we've seen with golf balls is that there are kind of slow, lower compression golf balls that are marketed to slower swing speed golfers, and higher compression golf balls that are marketed to faster swing speed golfers. Um, and it's like in my mind, it's like a bit of a myth of if you're slow, you should use a lower compression ball. But and so what we've seen in our testing is that if there's a slow versus fast, and on a 115 mile per hour driver shot is around 4, possibly even 5 miles an hour ball speed. So that's massive. That's 10, 15 yards right there, and then you lose some more if the aerodynamics are bad. Um, but when you don't swing as fast, there's not as much of a ball speed change. And so if you're 80 mile per hour driver club at speed, it might be a mile and a half or 2 miles an hour. So that 4 mile an hour difference changed to 2 miles an hour. And then what you do tend to see with lower compression balls is they also have lower spin, particularly on your 7 irons. So you might see someone gain a little bit of distance on their 7 iron because of the lower spin. And so I think that's kind of how golf ball manufacturers have arrived to targeting lower compression at slower swing speed golfers. It might feel better. You might not lose that much distance on a driver, but then you have lower spin, which will make your 7 irons and irons fly a little bit further. So there's definitely a bunch of nuance of that interplay of speed, skill, and how much it could save you. But I think it is pretty cool that a golf ball fitting for 90 handicap or a 90 golfer could change your score by 4 shots from the distance you lose on a driver and a 7 iron and control around the green.
Well, and I think it kind of flips that dynamic where people a lot of the times are like, well, I'm not that good. I don't need to get fit, or well, I'm not that good. It doesn't matter what I play. But when you frame it in that way, when you're like, hey, if you're averaging around 90, if you're that guy who's, shooting above 85, you're literally leaving shots on the table by not caring what you're playing. I think that's a huge point to make.
Yeah, and for us, I think it's why we care about so much at ping, even though we don't make a golf ball. It's like we can fight really hard to gain you 5 yards on a driver fitting, and then we'd hate for you to just pick any ball off the rack and then lose 20 yards immediately there. So it's like if you're gonna go through the effort of buying a new driver, we also want to make sure you're playing a pretty good golf ball for your game.
No
Yeah,
doubt.
it also, with that, I see it a lot with my students. They'll get the driver fit, all that, and I look in their bag and I see about 15 balls that they pulled out of the lake on number four, and it's just like, dude, you spent all that money on a driver, and you're literally just bringing it back 10 years by waterlogged balls, just secondhand balls, all of that. So I think we're starting to see more and more, especially with Ballnamic, like how important the golf ball is with the fit into your equipment.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's get into it. Like, what does it look like when somebody uses your system? Like, I mean, and we don't have to we don't have to step through click by click, but can you just kind of tell somebody what are they going to experience when they go through the Ballnamic fitting?
Yeah, so we try to kind of guide you from tee to green. So we start with some driver questions, try to figure out what trajectory do you want to hit the ball, how sensitive you are to performance in the wind. I think that's a pretty nice thing that we've layered on top of our ball predictions is how balls perform in different wind conditions. And so when you have a 10-foot difference in peak height, that can change how far your ball goes by 5, 10 yards into the wind versus downwind. Um, so if you do play in a windy area, you might say, hey, I really care about this ball's wind performance. And then we work our way to 7 iron, kind of your iron performance, and ask about how much stopping power do you want into the greens? Are you someone who struggles to hold greens or has issues kind of ripping it off the front of greens? Workability is a fun one. And so again, it's like how to tour pros think about golf balls. Tiger's always been a guy who knows he can take spin off of it, so so he doesn't mind a ball that spins really high. And the benefit of having the really high spin is you get high workability. So he likes the Tour BX that he can curve around trees, curve into greens, have it spin a certain way when it lands on a green. So we have a workability preference built in. Probably one of the more fun questions is flyer performance, and so it's maybe one that you experience a little bit more as a higher speed golfer. But if you're in light rough, maybe a dewy morning, a lot of people kind of in this pitching wedge 9 iron, 8 iron zone will experience a shot that kind of rockets over the green.
Right.
What happened? I didn't feel like I hit that any harder, and it just flew on me.
It's
Um,
wrong like Bolt.
Yeah, ball go far. It's tough when it happens and you're not expecting it, and you hit over the green where it's usually a little bit hard to get up and down, and all of a sudden you have a double bogey on your score. And so the question is, can you decode whether golf balls are more or less prone to flyers? And so the test that we run at Ping is spritzing water on the golf ball and hitting a wedge, which kind of has the most loft and would be the most sensitive to changes in friction, and measuring the spin rate. So this is how we dial in our wedge grooves. I think on my golf spot, we've kind of won the wet wedge retention spin test for a few years in a row.
I need that T-shirt.
I think we need a little spray bottle. But yeah, so we do it on every golf ball, and it's pretty dramatic. But the differences we'll see when you add moisture to a wedge shot, and you'll see good golf balls or balls that are good at retaining spin keep almost the same spin between wet and dry, and bad golf balls, it can go from 10,000 spin down to 6,000 spin. Um, and part of the reason why we try to test pretty premium golf balls is if you go to a sirloin cover, you're basically guaranteed to get that knuckleball. And it's really hard to get spin around the green, even in dry conditions. And then you go into wet conditions and you have zero chance. So it's pretty dramatic. Even between premium balls, it's dramatic between you can get some balls that actually go up in spin to like 11,000, some balls go down a little bit to 9,000, and then if they struggle in wet conditions, they're down at 6,000 or even 4,000.
It's crazy. I mean, it's an enormous difference in performance.
Yeah, it's why we care so much about it, both in our wedge testing side of things and also ball testing. Um, and yeah, it's kind of eye-opening every time. And then kind of rounding out the questionnaire, we go to kind of greenside performance and putter feel. And so we'll look at how does the ball spin on 30 or 40 yard pitch shots, and then how does the ball feel on when you're on the green? Is it firm, medium, soft? The wedge greenside chip test is pretty fun, where it's like we've seen that high spin balls on a 30-yard pitch shot will spin at 7,000 RPM, and it's pretty much like a 500 RPM gradient where the next tier of balls will spin at 6,500, the next tier will spin at 6,000, and kind of lower tier balls will spin at 5,500. So they're pretty. The nice thing from like my stats perspective is that these differences are very significant between golf balls. Like when we see a 10-yard difference in peak height on a driver, that's every single our ping man that we test on is so repeatable that the window of ball flights is probably plus or minus a couple feet. And so when you see a 10-foot difference, it's like, okay, that is a totally different aerodynamic profile for that golf ball. Um, so yeah, that was a meandering walk through it, but
No,
try to go all through driver, through iron, through wedge, through putter, and then pair up your preferences to the golf ball we recommend.
I think it's fantastic. I noticed when I did it myself, you can take it kind of two directions right off the bat. You can either go with your exact numbers with if you know your stats, you can actually input your spin numbers, or you can kind of go down the kind of, I guess, like, how far do you hit a 7-iron type of a route as well? Yes.
Yeah, so definitely, yeah, we knew that kind of the nuance. If you're in a fitting environment, you'll probably be hitting balls on a launch monitor, on a TrackMan, on a foresight, so you'll know your ball speed, launch, and spin. Some better players probably kind of have their driver launch conditions up off the top of their head, but I know I've only known my 7-iron launch conditions because I've become very aware of it in the past couple of years through testing, but that's a very rare one for people to know. And so it helps to have, if you're at home, to have a quick gut check. Oh, okay, I know I tend to spin a little bit higher or launch a little bit low. And we'll do a pretty accurate guess based on all the other fittings we've seen of what we think your launch conditions will be. Um, and so, yeah, we try to have the route for the fitters that may be way more detailed, but then if you're a little bit new to launch conditions or new to golf, we can guess our way to some pretty accurate recommendations as well.
So do you feel like there's like in this, I think you've probably answered some of this already with some of the conversation that we've had, but I've always felt like when you're in a kind of a controlled environment and when you're looking at numbers on a launch monitor and then kind of taking it out to real world, like sometimes there's differences. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily like it's that, what's on a spreadsheet doesn't necessarily always match, or at least doesn't feel like it matches reality. Do you guys find that in real life, no, you are what the spreadsheet says because we're using data that's not wrong. Data doesn't lie. Or do you feel like, it's one of those things to where, okay, you get out in the real world and then people kind of gravitate towards a feel they like, or kind of, when you talk about like a Tiger Woods or somebody who's used to bending a ball a certain amount or used to seeing certain shot patterns, they're gonna force that ball to kind of fit what they want it to do. Does that does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting question. There's a few different avenues. Yeah, so I think one thing that we definitely make sure to do is if we have a ball that shows up and it's like, oh, this is a really good performing ball from our testing, we'll go out and we'll play with it for a few holes. And so I think we've had some Snell balls, some Max Fly balls, some Vice balls recently. Wow, that performance is should be comparable to a Pro V1X, and its price point is lower. Is that real? And we'll go out and test it and see what kind of performance we're actually seeing on the course. That's kind of the ultimate validation. You want a high level golfer to play it in the environment that really matters. And so I think most of the time we have seen that our findings do kind of translate pretty well to real life. And so when that ball does fly 10 feet higher than you expect, it floats out there. I think I don't know, I've seen enough golf shots where I kind of have a pretty good like TrackMan eyes where I can say, okay, that flowed a little bit. That's
Hmm.
3,000 spin, that kind of knuckle, that's 2,200 spin. And so I have a pretty good feel of like what the aerodynamic profile on a golf ball is from watching the ball flight. And it helps when you have a guy like Marty who's played in major championships, whose ball flight's consistent enough that when the ball does go 10 feet higher, he's like, oh, that seemed a little bit funny. Um, so I think that translates pretty well. Um, I think the interesting one that we've found, I think gets pretty nuanced is we actually had this on our iron grooves where we we've done a lot of testing on what's the most predictable iron grooves or what's the optimal iron grooves for like our tour player irons, and we found that tight spaced grooves generate the most friction for us, and so that should lead to high spin both off dry conditions and off wet conditions. Um, the interesting thing is that kind of more traditional, little wider space grooves have a little bit lower friction. That lower friction off a fairway lie actually for a 7 iron will generate a tiny bit more spin, and the lower friction off a wet lie will generate a little bit less spin. So it's kind of this separation between how the iron will perform in dry versus wet conditions. And so we hypothesized it would be better if it was constant the entire time. It would be better if we went to that tight space groove pattern. And the feedback we got from our tour players is they actually liked the kind of original tour groove because they liked the higher spin off the fairway conditions and they could play for the flyer when they were in the rough. And so it was predictably like bad in a sense. And so I think that's a case where sometimes like our algorithms are going to say, oh, well, this ball is great because it retains spin in wet conditions most of the time. But for a tour player, that actually could lead to some unpredictability where they're in a condition with light amounts of moisture, or light rough, and they actually get some spin. But then you go in a little bit deeper rough and they don't get any spin because there's just too much to overcome. And so there's kind of a fine balance of kind of what our models predict is the best possible scenario versus what a tour player finds the most predictable or a good player finds the most predictable in real life. So that might be a bit of a deviation where you have to find the combination that works best for you.
Chris, one thing I can guarantee you is that you just sent about 10% of our listeners to their golf bag to stare at how spaced their grooves are, and they're about to go demo irons and look for irons with closer space grooves. I guarantee you.
They are hard to clean. That's what I found as a caddy.
So I think that I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up all of these ball brands, whether it's Titleist, if it's Callaway, if it's anybody that has a ball, Bridgestone, even the smaller brands like you brought up Vice and Snell and all of these, they all have some sort of an online fitting tool now. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what do you see as the big differentiator, the difference between Ballnamic and just using what these companies are offering?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did a quick peek through the Titleist ball fitting site before I hopped on, and it was good to kind of get a refresher of what they're doing. I think the difficulty they have is they aren't going to try to quantify the performance precisely. They're kind of give you buckets of high, medium, low, flight or spin or greenside feel, and because we are agnostic, unbiased, we can get a little more direct of here's our prediction for how this ball will perform with you exactly. I think it's frustrating if you go to a superstore and you look at the sides of these boxes, you're choosing between very high greenside spin or high greenside spin, or I don't know, low penetrating flight or low flight. And it's like, well, that's not
Mhm.
really telling me anything. And all
It's
the
all
guys say the
subjective.
same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And versus like one company's medium can be another company's high. It's nice to kind of have, we tested all on our pingman, the same settings, and we can tell you, okay, this is actually what a high flight looks like. This is what a low flight looks like. Um, so it's a pretty powerful spot to be in of we can kind of give you a pretty nice unbiased view of things.
What about versus like in person when you're doing something in person, like you go to and granted I think one of the things that you said you're unbiased, like you guys are not picking a brand over another. I think that that's huge, but like when somebody is being fit, like I would think theoretically if they're using real numbers, if they're using numbers off of a TrackMan or off of a good launch monitor, that there shouldn't be much of a difference as far as the input in person versus the input online, correct?
Yeah, so I'd say I think it's really easy to think that in person you can actually hit the ball. It'll be so much better than whatever we can possibly do online. And I think this is one of the rare cases where I would say it's actually better to do a Ballnamic fitting. So one of the issues with hitting indoors is you'll get the initial ball speed launch and spin, but you won't see the aerodynamics. If you're indoors, the TrackMan or Quad or whatever launch monitor will predict out how far the ball and how high the ball will fly based on their own internal ball model, and it's not ball specific. So that Marty case of he tried the Pro V1X versus the Pro V1 left dot, he'll never see that actual flight difference. The only reason why I saw it was because he was hitting indoor to outdoor and could see that ball flight go down by 10 feet. And that's usually not, I'd be shocked if people allow you to do ball testing outdoors and have to collect the balls at the end of your fitting. So aerodynamics are pretty much impossible to determine in a ball fitting, which is really tough. And the other one is the repeatability necessary to distinguish the differences that we see in Ballnamic is really, really hard. We've done analysis of a scratch golfer versus pingman, and we can get your ball speed for a golf ball within zero point 0.2 miles an hour. It would take, and that's in 5 shots. So basically, all 5 shots are in this kind of zero point 0.2 mile an hour band. We kind of have all those. Actually, to go to the end of Ballnamic, we'll give you our confidence intervals for what the carry will be, what the height will be. Um, and if you have a scratch golfer hit 400 shots with a ball, that's how many it takes to get down to a zero point 0.2 mile per hour ball speed confidence interval.
Hmm.
And so if you're trying to get precise with how a ball performs, like there's no chance you're going to hit 400 drives with one ball and then 400 drives with the next ball. And that's how much it will take to get to the equivalent of 5 shots with Pingman. Uh,
Right.
and so like if you're doing the in-person thing, it might help for some feel sensations, how the feel when you're putting, chipping. You might get your kind of visceral reaction to how that ball feels. Do you like it or not? But you will never get close to teasing out ball speed, launch, and spin differences at the way you can off our pingman and ball dynamic testing.
No doubt. Wes, I don't want to suck up all the air in the room. I want to give you some room to ask anything you have as well.
No, I mean, kind of answering my questions as we're going along. So this is great. I really like how, ping with the balls is brand agnostic, and getting very precise on defining what a low trajectory is compared to a high and being able to categorize them out so people can make that decision on their own. Because it's not practical to go, like you said, and hit 400 balls and try and figure out if it's good. At least you can get a ball or two and then go out, get a sleeve or two and try it based on what the suggestion is. So it cuts the time out of trying to find out what ball you want and, get all the other brands out of your head that you no need to even try.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing for me of now when I'm on the course and I see a random ball that you may find in the woods and you're like, oh, okay, I know what the TaylorMade TB5X kind of general trends are. I know if I want to like maybe pick this up and play it for the rest of the round. So it's pretty nice to know what trends you'd expect, and then they can also obviously verify it by playing it. But it's nice to have that jump start instead of just going to a box store and having seeing a sea of 100 selections, having no idea where to go. It's nice to be okay. Here are the 3 to 5 that should fit my game pretty well. This one doesn't fit my game because of X, Y, and Z. I think it's a really helpful, practical use of Ballnamic.
No doubt. So, are there any brands that have pushed back to like they're like, "Hey, we don't want to be a part of your footing tool"? I was kind of curious about that when I was going through it.
Yeah, I think there's probably a little bit. I think it was a little bit new early on about like what impact it would have. But I think mostly we've kind of been on the other side of things where we've had a couple brands say, "Hey, we're coming out with this ball. We would like if you tested it." I think that's definitely been
That's awesome.
the way more common scenario. And I think it's also, I guess, going back to like the Titleist golf ball recommender, it's kind of fun to see some of our visuals kind of make their way into how other brands showcase their balls. Like I don't think that you got a full breakdown of different performance characteristics across driver, 7-iron, greenside, spin before they have a match. They wrote down match performance indicator, which is very close to our match percentage. So it's kind of nice to see our tools kind of influence how golf ball manufacturers promote their own golf balls.
No doubt. I feel like they should be giving you guys a commission. Like if you're throwing recommendations up there, you guys should have some way to track that and collect a piece of revenue off of it.
Yeah.
I know I was saying it when we were off camera, but like that was one of the coolest parts of this to me. Like from a business perspective, like, and I kind of likened it to wheel manufacturers that I've seen where they take a solid billet of aluminum and they mill it down to a wheel and they take all the shavings, all the waste, they condense it all, and then they wait for the aluminum market to go up, and then they sell the aluminum on the open market. And that's what this kind of made me think of. I'm like, Ping has all this data. You guys are collecting this data for your fitting process, for your club manufacturing, and now you're being able to find ways to generate revenue with your waste, for lack of a better way of saying it, because it's not waste. It's quality information. It's actually, I think data in today's world is probably more valuable a lot of the times than hard goods. So you're
Mhm.
figuring out a way to generate revenue with the data that you guys have been collecting for years. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's always something that we've tried to keep our hands on to be able to support our tour staff. And then yeah, realize there's opportunity to kind of leverage it and provide it as a service to our fitting community. And it's kind of like there's tiers of, I guess, waste in the way you characterized it, whereas like
Yeah,
we could provide this to our tour players. It was like, oh no, this would be great if we could, even if it doesn't make any money as a service, if we can provide it as a way to add on to the fitting experience for someone who comes in for a ping fitting, that's worth it alone to be able to
100%.
make sure that kind of what we said earlier, like the $600 driver doesn't turn into a lost 20 yards with the wrong golf ball. That alone's worth it. And then kind of anything we can any revenue we can generate on the consumer side is kind of a nice side benefit.
In my head, I keep every time you say that, I got Johnny Drama stepping on Tom Brady's driver, breaking it in half. Chris, I want to ask you, how did you get into the business? How did like kind of what was your background? What was like, what was it that made you want to do this for a living?
Yeah, I was a math major in college. I played in the club golf team at Cornell. So I always definitely had an interest in golf and in math. I had an internship at Ping out of college, and it was kind of a perfect blend of the two worlds, two interests. And so it was really cool to see how kind of data focused and engineering focused Ping was. I think that's probably pretty unique in the golf industry that their attitude felt like it was like, let's get to the truth of what's happening in the physics side of things and the engineering side of things. And that truth will help us guide us towards making the best product. And so it's a pretty cool approach to be, hey, we're not going to focus on maybe the best marketing, but we're going to try and make the best possible golf clubs. And that will set the stage for everything else. And so I really enjoy being able to kind of leverage the data and math background that I had into helping out on the fitting side, and also try and apply some of those learnings to um, yeah, making the best engineering product possible. And then yeah, I mean the flip side is I definitely also had this background kind of in my DNA. So my dad is Mark Brody, and he came up with strokes gained golf stat, and so I was always kind of exposed growing up as to how do you apply stats to make things as simple as possible. I think that was I appreciate the comment that, hey, like you don't have to be kind of the golf pro to understand how Ballnamic works. It's a fairly simple process. And I think kind of what my dad did with strokes gained, you take some complicated kind of strokes gain analysis, and it boils down to, hey, you're driving. You can break down someone's game. Hey, your driving is costing you 2 shots. Your approach play is gaining you 1 shot. Your putting is gaining you another shot. So I think it's a pretty like beautiful way to apply math to a subject, is take some complicated kind of underlying stats and make it simple for everyone to understand.
No, I think it's fantastic. And it's really cool that you kind of blend two things that you love doing, like two passions that you had, into your profession. It's that, that old adage that if you're, if you do what you love, then you don't work a day in your life.
Yeah, definitely been very fortunate to end up being pretty very lucky.
That's fantastic. All right, Katie, I'm going to make you come off mute. I'm going to put you on the spot. So what was your journey? How did you get where you're at?
Yeah, so I've been at Ping now a year. So my year anniversary was yesterday, actually.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I came on as a digital marketing intern originally. I graduated from Arizona State with a degree in sports journalism, and I had always been interested in golf and in Ping especially. Um, I toured the campus when I was in like 2015 when I was 13, and I was like, this is where I want to work. Like, I want to be at Ping. And then, gosh, like 8 years later, it finally happened. So I just feel very fortunate for that. But yeah, I started as a digital marketing intern, and then I moved to the coordinator position back in November. So I've been now a year, which is so much fun. I love this job. Yeah, it's awesome. I love the people I work with, the company, and I think like Chris was talking to, like seeing the engineering behind all the clubs and the testing that goes into everything has been really fascinating for me to learn, especially as a marketing person. I don't know, I see that side of things. And I think
No
that
doubt.
also really helps my marketing as well, like you said, with blending science and the fun kind of for Instagram. So I've loved getting to do all of that.
Well, I think you guys do an excellent job of it, and it's just like it's that to both of your points. I mean, not for nothing. I mean, I don't think Ping could ask for a better commercial than both of you talking about what it's like to work for the company. And they sound like a fantastic employer, a fantastic place to have a career. So, you know, I think that's fantastic. There's not enough of that in this country, in this world right now,
Mhm.
to where you have companies that are absolutely, looking for ways to make themselves desirable to work at. So I think that's, and then also, like you said, they're putting out a product that they're answering their own why. They're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. They're putting out product that is quality. They're putting out product that actually is, impacting the sport. It's impacting the people who play it. And, as long as they select the right ball, they're not just chucking those drivers or chucking the set of irons or wedges out the door and going to buy something else. Wes, before we wrap up, did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
No, I mean, I think this is going to bring a lot of information out to our listeners, and I appreciate y'all's time jumping on the podcast and dropping some knowledge bombs, and hopefully get some more questions and maybe follow up with you guys, and because I'm sure we're going to get a few.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think this was special. I think that to me, like when I think I'd love to have somebody on the show, and even when I saw Ballnamic and I took the quizzes myself, I saw the kind of information that was coming back, and I was like, this would be really cool for the podcast. It's like you don't know what you don't know. And so it's like, there's so many more things. Like I had no idea we were going to talk about solar flares today. It's like there's so many, like, like again, there's so much more that goes into it than what you think of as just that average everyday golfer. But it's just like anything else. The people who are giving you the equipment or the things that we enjoy, the products and services that we enjoy as consumers, they put a lot of effort and a lot of sweat into it. So I want to thank you guys very much. And again, like Wes said, I hope that we can catch you guys down the road because I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on. It was fun talking.
Yes,
Absolutely.
thank you.
You're welcome.